If you're someone who is sick and tired of having lower back pain, you've done your stretches, you've done your exercises, but you still have that reoccurring pain coming back, then this video will be for you. By the end of this video, will you not only understand why you have lower back pain to begin with, but you will also be equipped with 3 different exercises to make sure that it doesn't come back. So why is it that you have the lower back pain to begin with? Well, really that can be attributable to 3 different factors. The first factor being a repetitive motion done over and over again that maybe isn't so favorable for the lower back. An example of this would be if I go to pick something up, instead of using the musculature on the back side of my body to take me through extension, if my lower back is always the thing that's driving that motion, then inevitably those muscles are gonna get tired and tight because they're being overutilized to take me through a particular range of motion. The second factor could be stress related. If I'm chronically in a heightened state of stress and my lower back is the place that I am constantly flexing into when I'm in that heightened state of stress, then inevitably these muscles are gonna continuously get tight. This in of itself is gonna create a vicious cycle. The more stress that I get, the more I start to anchor into my lower back. The more I anchor into my lower back, the more tight it becomes. The more tight it becomes, the more stressed I get, and then the whole vicious cycle repeats on itself. The third and final factor as to why you might be experiencing lower back pain could be mechanically related. What this means is if my muscles and my joints aren't necessarily in their most efficient positions, this can create unfavorable tensions in my body. As an example, if I deal with a hip rotation or a hip hike and a rib shift, and I'm walking around and I'm just going through my day-to-day life in that position, then mechanically, it's not gonna be very efficient long term. So what we might wanna start to look at is how can we change the mechanism between how our joints and muscles work with one another to take us through life on a day-to-day basis. So now that we understand some of the reasons as to why, let's actually get into the application. For the first technique, we wanna focus on creating some length really through these tissues. Because if you're experiencing some sense of tightness in the body, we first want to establish some level of length. So what we're going to do is come up against a wall, and then from this position here, we're going to start to sit our hips back. Now, once my hips are seated in this hinge position, what I want you to try to sense or seek is some level of length coming into the hamstrings. It's almost as if you're creating a little bit of a hamstring stretch. And what we're trying to do here is get the hamstrings to come online to support our hips. Now, once we have that sensation, or if you don't, that's okay too, you're gonna start to take an inhale into this lower third of your back. So I'm gonna hold this position. I'll take an inhale in. I can feel some length get created there. And then on the exhale, we're gonna try to primarily keep that on the front side. So I'm gonna almost think about compacting everything on the front side of my body through the exhale. Now, once you go through the breath cycle, what you can do is you can start to use the length that you created through the hamstrings to stand yourself back up. So now not only are we creating some form of length through the backside, into the lower back and really through the entire backside of our body, but we're also giving our body the understanding of how is it that we can use tension to take us through this phase of extension. Because chances are when I work with people, a lot of the time when they're coming through this phase of extension, which is merely me just going from here to here, they tend to overuse these lower back muscles. So the more that we can give the body an understanding or the blueprint of where we want tension to reside, the higher likelihood we're gonna have of the body using that in the future. So for our second technique, we're gonna build on some of the principles that we were covering in our first with that hinge position, but instead of doing it from 2 legs, we're gonna just take 1 leg back. Now what this is gonna allow us to do is get a little bit more sensation into things like the hamstrings and the glutes, as well as another muscle that often goes forgot about, which is our adductor. So what we're gonna do here is really emphasize that principle of where we want tension and what muscles we wanna work to take us through space. So if you're one of those people that always uses your lower back, then this exercise is gonna be awesome for you. To start with, what we're gonna do is get 1 leg in front of us. In this case, it's my left, and you're gonna bring about 90% of your weight there. From this position, we're gonna start to sit the hips back, and we're gonna come into something I call a hybrid hinge position. So it's not a straight hinge where my upper body is parallel, but I'm also not just going into a lunge where my body is staying more vertical. We're coming somewhat in between those 2 points where we start to find some of the hamstring and glute come online. From here, you can work on some of the principles of that breathing into the lower back. So I can take an inhale, and now you're gonna emphasize pushing that left foot down to stand yourself back up. This part of it is going to be really important because it allows us to first get heavy into that foot and kind of build a connection point between our foot, our knee, and our hip. Now, using that foot pressure to stand ourselves up, what ideally you're gonna feel come online is things like your hamstrings and glutes to take you through this phase of extension. And what you can see here is that as I'm coming up, I'm not allowing my upper body or my trunk to overextend, causing this excessive curve to occur in my lower back. So do your best to sit the hips back, maybe add a little bit of rotation with the hip and the upper body. Try to feel those muscles come online and then use those muscles to stand yourself up with. This last and final exercise isn't one that I see a lot of in the rehab, especially in the lower back pain community, if there's such a thing. And that is gonna be our lateral movement. A lot of the time, if I'm dealing with lower back pain, it's as a result of there being this underlying sense of instability through the hips. The more stability that we can create through the hips, the more it's inevitably going to create stability upstream into the lower back. So what we're going to do here is build on our split stance position that we're covering in the previous exercise, and we're just going to start to add a side step to it. So you can see here that my hips rotate to my left, rotate to my right. And now I'm starting to build a little bit more of a dynamic nature around letting these tissues and muscles work in a more dynamic way. The more I can allow my body to understand how these muscles need to work dynamically, the higher likelihood they are going to work when I start to go through things in my day-to-day life. So get yourself set up in that split stance position that we're covering in the second technique. Get yourself really immersed in that sensation of what stability feels like, and then almost allow your body to arrive at that sense of stability as you go through this side step motion. Because really, at the end of the day, the more we can give our body the understanding of how to arrive at stability dynamically, the less likelihood we have of reoccurring pain coming into the lower back, and ultimately, the better mover we're going to be. Anyways, that is gonna wrap it for today's video on lower back pain. Hopefully you learned something new, and if you did, do that YouTube thing where you smash the like button. You can also subscribe for more content, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.